back to Life North of the 54th. I'm Garrett Brown.
And I'm Preston Brown. We'd like to welcome on our show with us Mr. Hassanali, and we'll have him introduce himself a little bit.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's been a while since I've seen you here.
Yeah, it's been a while since we passed through high school, so.
Yes. So my name's Farouq Hassanali, and I teach math and physics and robotics at Peace Wapiti Academy. And that's a high school here in Grande Prairie, Alberta. And you might have sensed from what the boys were saying that PWA is the high school that both Preston and Garrett attended. And so that's where I first met them. And their siblings as well. I have passed through these halls. Just a quick intro, I guess. I was born in Edmonton, and I have one younger brother, one younger sister. Do you want me to give you a quick outline of my life?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, just a quick intro, sure.
Yeah, people's stories are great.
Okay, yeah, it's a quick intro, I guess. So yeah, born in Edmonton. I have one younger brother, one younger sister. Growing up was fairly uneventful, but when I graduated high school, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I loved science. So I ended up doing a science degree at the University of Alberta. After that, I did get my ed degree, and that's why I am now a teacher. I have a 14-year-old son, Kieran, and a 13-year-old stepdaughter named Claire. I have a loving wife named Sydney, who happens to also be a teacher, and I met her here in Grande Prairie. And I'm excited for tomorrow because the Oilers are playing tomorrow, and it's going to be a great series against LA. I don't know if you, Garrett, living in Toronto, are a Leafs fan, but it wasn't so good yesterday. If you were following the Leafs, it wasn't a good outcome.
I don't follow it. I played a lot of sports in high school, but I just am not a fan of watching sports.
Okay,
So
that's fair.
that's my life, and so I'm usually blissfully unaware of whatever's happening in the sports world. So
And I want to add, you were an amazing athlete. I remember, Preston, did you play basketball? Were you on the
yeah,
senior team?
We both did, yes.
Yeah,
Preston's also quite an amazing athlete.
yeah. I mean, your whole family they're amazing athletes. I think all of them, now that I think of it, played basketball. I think you were all basketball stars, and I wish I had that sort of talent because I never did growing up. Never was an athlete, but I'd play rec soccer and rec ball hockey and things like that, but never joined a high school team. So you guys were great. You guys were great at basketball for sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. I think we were good, but we were none of us ever played college, so we weren't really that good.
No, but you know what? There's something to be said for being able to play in high school even. I think that's quite the feat, right? We have a lot of good basketball players here, and the fact that you made the team, I think, speaks to your athletic abilities.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I feel in part that I've been coasting on the coattails of my athleticism since I left high school. And as a university student, I have not been athletic, but yet my body still looks like it might be athletic.
Yes.
But if I moved, it does not move like it used to.
No. Well, because we're all getting older, that's why. You know how that is now, right?
Yep.
If I do the math, I can figure out how old you guys are now. But yeah, as you get older, you start feeling those aches and pains, and your body just doesn't recover as fast as it used to. And
Yep.
I think back to watching you guys play on the Titans basketball team, and it was just back and forth, back and forth. I don't know if you guys could do that right now. I think once you're past a certain age, like you lose so much of that athletic ability as you get older. It's actually quite astonishing just how much endurance you have in high school. But no, I'm sure you two are still in great shape. So
I mean, I still play ball. I still run up and down and slam dunk, so
well, the thing is, in college, you're competing against so many more people, right? I don't.
the level is so high in college, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's college is another level when you get to that level, and like I said, I think just the fact that you guys made the high school team is impressive.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I remember telling myself the GPRC, like the Grand Prairie Regional College at the time, what they had some like spring tryout when I was in my last year of high school at PWA.
Yeah,
And I remember telling myself that I would try out, and that would determine whether or not I would go to college immediately or work after high
right,
school.
right.
And they're like, we're taking 16 players. And at the end of the tryouts, they came up to me and like, you were player number 17. So, if you want a red shirt with us, you can like come to
Oh,
our practices and hang out. But, Like you weren't quite good enough to actually make the team. So I was
Right.
like, well, thanks for the invitation, but I think I'll just graduate high school
You'll
and go
pass.
get a job.
Yeah. No, you know what? I didn't know you tried out. That's great. I'm glad you at least tried.
Yeah, they told me my shot was too inconsistent, but that I
Wow.
had enough hustle. So
Yeah. No, you're competing against, really good talent at that stage. But
yeah,
I'm glad you tried out though.
yeah, it was quite the experience.
Yeah.
It was pretty good.
Preston, did you try out at all anywhere?
No, I skipped the whole college university thing.
Yeah.
But at the end of high school, I did have because I did very well in track and field in grade 12,
Yeah.
and I had the U of A track and field coach and the University of Calgary track and field coach approach me to invite me to the college.
Oh, nice.
But since I did go to university, it did better.
Right. Right. No, that's fair. That's fair.
But I remember they each gave me a business card, so that made me feel pretty good. Yeah,
Yeah, they're recruiting all the talent, right? I never got any of those cards.
I went to Fairview College instead.
It's a good choice.
And that's good. That's and yeah, I'm sure you enjoyed it.
I did, yes, it was great.
Yeah. Did you do carpentry?
Yep, I got my red seal. Yep,
Yeah, that's great. It's fantastic.
yep, it's been good.
Yeah.
So, Farouk, what led you to become an educator versus other areas of science occupation?
Well, in high school and also in university, I tutored quite a bit, just kind of like for side money. I actually, part of me really enjoyed it, and part of me really enjoyed teaching other students concepts and ideas in a much more approachable way. Sometimes I'm sure we've all had teachers or profs who don't have the same learning style as we do. Maybe those learning styles suit other kids, which is great. And sometimes you'll have profs or teachers where the learning style just doesn't match the way you learn. And I think for me, it was a fun way to try and figure out, okay, how does this student learn the best? What's the best way to teach this student? And I found that fun. I found it a challenge to try and modify the way you would explain things to different people. And depending on their learning style, the way you explained it affected how they would receive that information. And I thought that was really interesting. And I was told a few times that I was a good tutor and that I had a lot of patience and I explained things really well. And once you start receiving all those compliments, you start thinking, you know what, maybe this is a future career, maybe. And so at the end of my science degree, I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to go into teaching, but I was definitely starting to lean towards there because of all this great feedback I've been receiving from all these parents and students. And I remember I applied for business after science, applied for business, applied for pharmacy. I was possibly thinking about a master's in science. And then ed, of course, was an option as well. But Preston, I guess to kind of answer your question, the reason I didn't go more into science for me was I worked in a lab in the summer while I was doing my degree. And it was a great experience. I really enjoyed it. It was surprising in a way of what research actually looks like. Days can be long, and not all of it is super exciting all the time. And there's a lot of data collecting. And I just didn't want to necessarily spend a career doing that full time. And I'm sure some people love that sort of thing. And there's days, trust me, when students are crazy where I want to do that. I want to go back to doing something like that. Sometimes I wish I had a desk job, so there's pros and cons to every career. But
Yes.
I enjoyed the experience of working in a lab at the U of A. I enjoyed parts of, working with people and solving problems and all that sort of stuff. But I'm sure Garrett can attest to this. Sometimes it can be boring. Sometimes it can be repetitive. It's not all that flashy research that you see on TV. Sometimes it's a grind, and sometimes it's, you set up an experiment and you come back a week later and you find out that you've got to start over because you screwed something up, right? And I wanted to interact more with people. I found, especially because I was tutoring a lot of kids. I just enjoyed that back to back with students and being able to explain something to kids and them understanding it better. But it was hard. It was a tough decision because I always did plan on going into science and eventually doing research because I really loved science. It's the whole reason I went to do a science degree in the first place. But I think I wanted more people around me. I wanted more people to talk to instead of working in isolation. And then there was also the whole thing about, and again, Garrett can attest to this, you're constantly looking for money. You're constantly looking for grants and ways to fund your research and things like that. And master's students and PhD students would tell me all these things about how frustrating it can be. And so that kind of discouraged me. It kind of discouraged me from doing a master's and doing a PhD and things like that. So I thought, you know what? I enjoy teaching. I enjoy science. Why not get into the classroom and share the excitement of science with future students? And I haven't looked back. I really enjoy it. Most days are good. Some days are not so good. And like I said, I wish that I had a quiet desk job once in a while, but there's always those days, and those days always go away, and you always get the next good day, and then you remember why you got into teaching.
That's an excellent perspective.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I can attest to what you're saying about the chasing grant money and
Yes.
the tedious days there. They're definitely true.
Yeah, and I mean the two of you, I don't know, Press, did you take physics 20?
I took 20, 30, and I took math 31. When I took math 31, we broadcasted it to Spirit River that year.
Oh, yes. Yes, I remember that. There was a student so many years have gone by. There was a student in Spirit River that needed a calculus teacher. And so I remember and remember, this was before Zoom and all these technologies, right? We were using odd video conferencing contraption in my room, and
Yes, it was something else.
we'd have a camera, and was it the camera in the corner of our room, Preston?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it
And
was a weird setup because we're so used to webcams now and how easy it is to share screens and all that sort of thing. But we were testing out video conferencing, and it worked. It worked for what we wanted it to do, which was get a calculus teacher for that one student. It was a little bit of an experiment, but I was good with it. And Preston, all you guys were great with it in the classroom. You guys all shared in that experience.
yeah,
And but I was gonna say I found the two of you, and including Travis and Lisa and all your siblings, you guys were wonderful students. You guys were the typical students that remind me of why I love being a teacher, because you guys worked hard. And it wasn't about, you guys were smart, obviously, but it wasn't even about that. To me, it's all about, are you working hard? Are you asking good questions? And are you good people? Are you do you communicate? Do you help other people out and all those sorts of little things? And your whole family was great. I've seen most of them pass through here, and I wish we had more students like that. It kind of reassures me that I've picked the right profession. Because sometimes, like I said, sometimes you encounter days where you question yourself and question your judgment. But it was students like you who definitely made it worth it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So what led you to Grand Prairie then? Is it just sort of throwing applications out to the wind and seeing where they stick, or were you sort of actually looking at the opportunity that PWA was offering you?
No, you know what? Around the time I graduated from my ed degree, Alberta was going actually through, they had a bunch of teacher surpluses going on in every district. And they were making cuts during that time. So there were huge layoffs. So it was really, really hard. To be honest, ideally, I was looking for a job in Edmonton because I graduated from the U of A. My family was there. So I was kind of looking at getting a job somewhere in the city. But like I said, there were layoffs going on at that time. And it was tough getting a job anywhere in Alberta, let alone in the city of your choice. And so I had a couple options. Some people choose to do something else for a couple of years and until teachers are starting to be hired again, or you kind of expand your horizons and apply anywhere in the province and maybe even out of province. There's a lot of teachers we have here at our school at PWA who are not from Alberta, and because their province is going through cuts, right? So I applied to a lot of places in Alberta, and my very first job in teaching was actually in Sturgeon Lake, which was right beside Valley View. I'm sure you'll pass through it every time you make the travel from Grande Prairie to Edmonton and back. You'll pass Sturgeon Lake School. You can see it from the highway. If you kind of tilt your head, you can see a building there. It'll say Sturgeon Lake School. that was my first teaching job, was teaching there. And it was teaching grades 10 to 12, teaching some math courses. And teaching there was hard in the sense that the classes were really, really small. The class, we're talking like, I had a math 30-2 class. We're talking like 3 or 4 kids, or a math 9 class with 3 or 4 kids.
Wow.
And it was tough. It was tough because when you go into teaching, you don't quite imagine a classroom like that. And that brings its own challenges. Ultimately, my goal was, I enjoy the challenge of teaching a calculus class or teaching a physics 20, physics 30 type of class. And they didn't actually offer those courses at Sturgeon Lake School. So after a couple of years, I got a job in Valley View at Hillside Junior Senior High. You might have played some basketball games there, I'm guessing. I don't know. I don't know if you ever played basketball there.
I definitely played them in GP in tournaments, though.
Yeah. So that was the school I taught at for a couple of years there. That was the first time I was able to teach physics 20, physics 30, and math 31, and all those sorts of fun courses that I enjoy personally. From there, how did I come to Grand Prairie? Well, Valley View was a really small place for me. I found it, coming from Edmonton, Valley View is, I think it had 2,000 people at that time.
It's a one high school town.
It's a one high school town. Yeah. And I remember telling my friends it had one four-way stop in the center of town, no lights. It had, a few liquor stores. It had one bowling alley and no kind of brand name type of stores, no McDonald's, no Walmart, no Cineplex. Now they've got a Tim's, but back then they didn't even have a Tim's. It was a bit of a culture shock. Such a small town compared to Edmonton. Now, having said that, it was a great town. The people were great. People were friendly. You'd go shopping and you'd bump into people that you work with, and you bump into students. And it was a great kind of small town mentality there, which has its own benefits, which is great. But coming from Edmonton, I found it's too small. I wanted to go to a movie. I wanted to go to
Swimming pool.
yeah, exactly. I want to go to a swimming pool. I want to go to even Walmart. I want a Walmart. I'm all for the mom and pop stores, and it's great supporting those businesses as local businesses. We try and support them here, even in Grande Prairie. But I also do like the Walmarts, and I like the cheap stuff you can get there. And so I applied from Valley View then. I found that PWA was hiring a physics 20, physics 30, math 31 teacher. So I put my application in. I got the call, drove an hour here to do the interview, and they must have liked me because they hired me. And I've been at PWA ever since. But that's what got me to Grande Prairie ultimately was, made that path from Sturgeon Lake to Valley View and then finally to Grande Prairie. And Grande Prairie was the perfect size. There's a reason I'm still here after, 18 years living in Grande Prairie. It's a perfect size. It's got all the things I want. It's got the movie theater. It's got the swimming pools. But it's not so big that you're spending an hour or half an hour in traffic every day. And that's something that blows my mind now, because when I go back to Edmonton and visit family, or the commutes, the traffic, you're stuck in rush hour. If you're ever caught in Edmonton, you're in traffic for an hour. Like it's crazy to me now. Coming here, if you're in rush hour, it's 15 minutes. You'll get to your place in about 15 minutes, and it's great. You save so much time. It's so much more relaxing and less stressful. I can only imagine what Toronto is like in rush hour.
Just don't drive.
Yeah, don't drive.
Yeah, it's bad enough Garrett doesn't own a
Yeah.
car anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure you get to places a lot faster by not driving. Preston, you're in Edmonton, right?
Yep. I've been in the Edmonton city since the summer of 2017. So
Yeah. And you must notice the difference in traffic between Edmonton and Grande Prairie.
yes, I do. But I was living in Portland, Oregon before moving here, which is like traffic is even worse.
Even worse.
Even
Yeah.
worse there. Like sometimes my commute was like an hour and 15 minutes one way.
Yeah. And
averaging like 30 kilometers an hour over like
Oh man.
30 kilometers.
Yeah, I just can't do that anymore. I
And
I think
Edmonton's not that bad.
I mean Grand Prairie spoiled me because I can get to anywhere I want to go in 10 minutes, right? And I love that. If I need to go grocery shopping, I'll go 10 minutes, go grocery shopping, come back. If I want to come to work in the morning, I don't have to leave an hour and a half before my work starts. And it just those little things I love about Grand Prairie. Like I said, it's part of the reason I'm still here. And I mentioned earlier, I met my wife here. She's a teacher as well. She works at GP Comp at the Composite right across from us here. She was born and raised here. And no, it's the perfect size. And that's kind of what brought me here.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I miss about a small town, and I don't think that Toronto is my forever home.
There's pros and cons, right? There's pros and cons to the small towns.
My favorite thing about living in Toronto is that I can walk 10 minutes to get
Right.
groceries.
Right.
But if I don't want to walk 10 minutes, I can walk across the street to get more expensive groceries. And if I don't want to walk across the street to get more expensive groceries, I can go into the first floor of the building that I live in to get more expensive groceries.
There's a little cost benefit analysis happening there, eh?
Yeah. Everything is pretty much like 15 minutes away on a bike or something like that.
Right. You're smart. Yeah.
For me, because we live downtown close to the university. For many other people, like when we first moved to Toronto, we were probably only 5 or 6 kilometers from downtown, and
Right.
it would take me an hour or an hour and 15 minutes on public transit to get downtown, like to get to school. It was just awful.
You can walk faster than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you can.
That's 5 kilometers an hour, man.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
But yeah, oh yeah, the feelings of the smaller town of Grand Prairie. It's nice to hear.
Right. But you must both, I mean, you both grew up in the Grand Prairie area here. You must both see some good things about living in larger cities.
I definitely do. There's more business to do. Just more people
Yeah.
trading, more amenities, more
Right.
suppliers of products and services.
Right.
Just I remember in Grand Prairie working like 3 years there. It's like we needed something. It's like it's got to come from Edmonton. We
Yeah.
got to put it on a truck and get it here
Yeah.
over and over again.
Yeah.
When you're in Edmonton, I can just drive and get
Right.
peculiar product if I need to get something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely pros and cons for sure. I think it's good that, we've all now lived in smaller towns and also bigger cities. And I actually, I'm glad that I've done that because you can kind of see both sides and you're probably comfortable now living in either, right? Wherever life takes you from here on in, you're probably comfortable living in, a smaller town or a bigger city. So it's nice to have that perspective of both, I think.
Living in Toronto, if you have a car, you're pretty much 15 or 20 kilometers from a Costco or an IKEA.
Right.
There are like 3 or 4 IKEAs in Toronto and like many, many Costco's and Walmarts. It's just
Yeah.
just pick your direction and
Everything you
that's
need.
your favorite one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can't,
It's quite handy.
yeah. Yeah. If you can't find a Costco, you just drive around a little bit. I'm sure you'll run across one, right?
Yeah, and each Costco has its own flavor.
Oh,
The Costco's in some districts will have like more Asian products, and the other ones will have more Jewish products.
oh,
It's pretty,
interesting.
or more Indian products. It's pretty great.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. You know what? Even
Yeah.
I don't think the Costco's in Edmonton are even like that. I feel
I don't
they're
think so.
no. Yeah, I think Toronto because it's it takes multicultural to a different level even, right? And
It does.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and that's interesting. I didn't know that about the Costco there. That's
Yeah,
cool.
we mostly realized when we went to one Costco and they had in the freezer section, they just had like whole pigs and whole sheep just like
Oh,
frozen,
wow.
hanging there, just ready for people to take home and put on a spit or something.
Wow, that's
I
amazing.
don't know.
I didn't know that Costco kind of tailored their stores depending on they probably look at what the population is around the site that they have there. And Toronto and Vancouver are probably the biggest multicultural places in Canada, right? So but Edmonton's up there though, I think. Edmonton and Calgary are fairly multicultural as well.
Yeah, the population is just like less than a quarter of the size, though.
Right, exactly.
But it's a good blend. There's people from all walks of life here.
Absolutely. And I love it. And that is something that I did miss coming from Edmonton as well. I love the multiculturalism. I love restaurants. of all ethnicities, right? Like I love Indian food, I love Sri Lankan food, I love Japanese food, I love Thai food. And obviously Edmonton and Toronto would have so many restaurants where you can try anything, right? And even see people of all walks of life, all different colors. And so, again, coming to Valley View, I'm looking around and it's like, wow, there's like three non-white people in the town or something like that, right? And I was fine with it. It wasn't, I'm not saying that it was bad, but I like different perspectives. I like talking to people from different backgrounds. I like learning about their cultures and all those sorts of things, right? I've noticed like I've lived about 18 years here, and even Grande Prairie is slowly shifting. I don't know when the last time you visited Grande Prairie, but you can definitely see that shift slowly happening, and there's definitely different people here now than there were 15 years ago. And you can see businesses cropping up, different types of restaurants cropping up, and I think that's great. I think it brings some excitement to the city and new perspectives, and I'm enjoying it. I'm curious to see what'll happen in the next 10 years, right? Because I remember being here and there was I think one or two sushi places, but now there's a whole bunch of sushi places. There's like more than one Indian restaurant. There's some Thai restaurants. It's great. I love it.
When we moved to Toronto and we had a car, we would go to Brampton sometimes to go
Yeah.
get Indian food.
Oh, nice.
In the Toronto region, Brampton is where there's a much more dense population of people who've immigrated from India.
The restaurants here in Grande Prairie, like the Indian restaurants that I've been to, are actually owned and operated by Indians, and you can tell in the food, right? And even the Thai restaurants here, I think, are owned and operated, and the cooks are Thai, and you can never go wrong with that, right? They're cooking the authentic recipes. It's delicious. It's amazing.
Would you mind telling us, if you can, any stories or any particular stories about your teaching experience that you would feel comfortable sharing? I know that teachers have pretty wild stories sometimes.
We come across some crazy things. Absolutely, we do. What's funny is I think I'd mentioned to you, Garrett, that I had listened to a couple of your podcasts, especially after you came to visit me. We had a chat about physics, I think, a little bit, and Feynman. And
Yeah,
anyway, I think after that meeting, I think you had mentioned that you do a little bit of podcasting. And I remember going home that evening and Googling your name and trying to find these podcasts, because I think it's great that both of you are involved in podcasting. I love podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. I think it's great when people can sit down and just talk. And I enjoy listening to podcasts where they're just chatting for 3 hours about all sorts of topics. And it just beats those quick TikTok style of information that you see nowadays. But anyway, I Googled you, Garrett, and I found some podcasts, and I saw that Kim Holder was one of your guests.
yep.
And of course, I listened to that podcast. And it was funny because I heard her talking about the famous glowing pickle story, which
Yep.
I'm sure you've heard many, many, many times in your life, because it just doesn't go away, this glowing pickle story. So I'm sure you've heard it, but I mean, the gist of it is that, I was still a fairly new teacher. And of course, being a new teacher, teaching physics 20 and physics 30, and you're trying to excite the kids. So in physics 30, one of our units is electricity. And so that, hey, this is a perfect time where I can electrocute some stuff. And again, I'm sure Holder has told you the story, so I don't want to rehash every detail, but I took some extension cords. We kind of frayed those extension cords up. We attached some forks to those things, and we stuck some forks into a pickle, and I plugged it in, and that pickle, if you've seen videos, it glows like a light bulb because of the sodium, and kids love that. And I did a hot dog, and kids love that because the hot dog starts smoking, and students start wanting to taste it. So I said, okay, yeah, eat it, go ahead. And so they tasted the hot dog. And then I did an olive. And of course, you both know what happened next, which is the olive was too small, and the two forks touched, and it blew the breakers and fused the two forks together. And I like that story because the kids absolutely loved it. The kids thought it was hilarious that Holder was not impressed. Holder was not impressed with me. But when I say that, I'm sure you've seen this because you both took Holder's classes. She can be mad at you, but you know that she's not actually really mad at you.
Yeah.
Where she'll give you a lecture, but it's kind of a funny lecture because you know you've kind of you haven't annoyed her, but you've done something funny where she can now go into this long spiel about how you shouldn't be doing this and that. And it was hilarious. And I love Holder, but she gave me this long spiel about, wow, that's really unsafe. And I did all the basic safety things. But having said that, I find that as I've gotten older, I'm a lot more careful with all these things now.
Yeah.
When you're younger, there's something about just being safe, but not being overly safe. Whereas now I'm overly safe and I triple check everything. I think part of it is because once you have kids, you kind of don't want to risk your life for anything really, right? And but that pickle story is infamous at PWA. Like it students after students hear this because teachers keep passing that story down. And it's such an infamous story because I think part of it is because, it's hilarious that I blew all the breakers and, Mr. Hassanali got in trouble and this and that. And it was a fun moment between Holder and I.
Yeah.
And that story was just, it's one of those stories that will kind of live on after even I'm retired, I think. I know that's one of my favorite stories because I remember how much the kids loved it. I also remember, you know what, it also brought Holder and I together, to be honest. Me being a new teacher, it kind of bonded us in a way, and we remained friends ever since. And because she was a teacher here, because PWA opened, I think, a couple of years before I came here. And she was one of the original PWA teachers. And I think I'd come 2 years after PWA had already opened up. So no, I looked up to Holder, and it was great that we could laugh about that story and recount the story on podcasts such as yours. It was great. But if you're looking for a new story, aside from that pickle story, I have a couple quick ones as well. And you might have heard this because teachers like to also tell students these stories about me to their classes. But I don't know if you ever heard about the pajama story. Did you ever hear about what happened to me in my very first year of teaching? You ever heard of a pajama story?
Not that I recall.
I have not.
No.
Okay, well, it was my first year at PWA. And, back then you always try and prank the new teachers a little bit. So nothing crazy, nothing that'll hurt them or anything like that. But just little pranks here and there against new teachers is always kind of a fun way to bond with them, right? And I remember on everyone's agenda, on the announcements, on the calendars, at staff meetings, there was this one date where students and staff were supposed to wear pajamas. And we do that. Like we have pajama days at school. And I'm sure you've been involved in some of those, or at least, it's like, oh, it's pajama day tomorrow. Okay, everyone can come wear pajamas. So anyway, I said, okay, great. I'll come wearing pajamas. So I come out in my pajamas. I've flip-flops on. I walk into the building. Absolutely no one wearing pajamas. Like no one, no students, no staff. My first reaction is, did I get the date wrong? So I go inside, I go into the office. I'm like, is it pajama date? What's going on? And you could tell by their grins and laughs that it was a prank. And so I was the only one in the entire school wearing pajamas. I had these flip-flops on, and I had to go through the whole day in these ridiculous pajamas while everyone else was dressed in normal clothes. And, it was hilarious. I thought it was hilarious. You don't think it's that big a deal, listening to the story, but when you're wearing pajamas, but no one else is, it does actually feel a bit awkward. You feel like you're a slacker. You feel like you haven't dressed up. You feel like you just woke up and decided to come to school. And your head's not even in the right frame of, I'm at work right now, when no one else is wearing pajamas.
Yeah.
And so that was a great story because, the staff loved to laugh at me about how I felt for that. And it was well planned, well executed because the students were all in on it. All the calendars I looked at said pajama day. Announcements was talking about pajama day. And so I remember praising the staff at how well that was done because it totally blindsided me. I would not have expected me to show up and me being the only one wearing pajamas. But I will add that on the next pajama day, not only did I not trust them, so I did not wear pajamas that day on the next pajama day. They told me it was a legit pajama day. I didn't wear pajamas. I dressed up in a suit that day just to show them you can all now wear pajamas and I'm gonna dress up in a suit. So they thought that was fun. So I did that when we had the next pajama day. It was a legit pajama day, but that's okay. I was fine in my suit.
Yeah. No, I don't recall that one, but I'm glad it worked out not so terribly for you.
Yeah, oh, it was a fun one. Yeah.
Yep. Good harmless prank, just slightly embarrassing.
Slightly embarrassing, but again, I think these little things bond staff members, right? And especially if they're done in good fun. I think these little things like that, it's always fun to be a part of. It's always fun to there's a bonding moment that happens after you've gone through something like that. And
Yes. Yeah.
it's always fun. I don't know if any of you two have gone through anything like that at work or as students or anything like that, but these little harmless pranks because you're the newbie. I'm definitely not for initiations and all that sort of stuff, right? I remember
Yeah.
at PWA we had a hard stance against initiating new kids or initiating new players on the basketball team or stuff like that, right? Like no tolerance for that stuff. But I like the little pranks, the harmless pranks that are not, as long as both parties can laugh at it, and I think it's fun.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
My experience as an undergraduate student, there were lots of people who would show up in their pajamas for early morning classes.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, like I think they didn't care.
That's funny. That's funny because
I wouldn't check the mail in my pajamas if I could help it. But I'm old fashioned like that.
yeah. No, you know what? It's funny because when I was at U of A, like none of that happened. Like no one would show up to early. No one would dare show up to a morning class dressed in pajamas. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. I'm kind of like Preston. Like I go home and I get into my pajamas. Like the minute I'm home, I get into my pajamas. I love just, I don't want to be in jeans at home.
Yeah.
But it's funny because like I said, at the U of A, even morning classes, no one was in pajamas. Like no one. And it's funny that you tell me that because I think there's been a little bit of a shift in that sort of stuff being okay. Like
Yeah.
even in high school, even on non-pajama days, people will come in sweatpants and comfy clothes, or once in a while we have kids come with blankets, right? They'll come sit down in the classroom and have a blanket on them and they're writing notes and everything, and we're fine with it, right? It's not a big deal. But it's funny that now even at the universities, you're starting to get kids coming in with pajamas on, and I mean maybe they're smart, right? Maybe you don't have to dress up, right? You just get out of bed and brush your teeth and shower and get back into your pajamas and go to class. It's comfortable.
Yeah. It's usually in the larger lecture hall, right, where you could hide in the back or something.
Yeah.
Fall asleep in the back.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. If you're wearing pajamas, I think it'd be hard to stay awake in some classes, right? Because you're dressed all comfy still.
Yeah.
Sometimes wearing uncomfortable jeans keeps you awake during those long lectures.
We have some other questions for you too about just your experience of living in the Peace Country. Could you tell us some of your favorite things about the region, or some of your favorite parts of the climate or geography, or whatever comes to mind? Favorite thing about the people?
When I lived in Valley View and lived in Grande Prairie, the biggest thing for me was, well, I was just amazed at how large the geographical area was, to be honest. Until you actually start driving north of Edmonton, you don't realize how much land there is here. Because if you go south, right, you come across so many cities. You go Edmonton and Red Deer and Calgary, and you see all these cities are fairly close together. You come here, and sometimes the next town is 2 hours away, and that town's small too. There's no Walmart there. There's no movie theater there. So it kind of shifted my perspective a little bit of how much open land there is north of Edmonton. And it's beautiful. The drive coming from Edmonton, it's peaceful. There's a lot of open land here. There's a lot of farmland here. And one of the things I've learned to love about the Peace Country is how peaceful that is. The hustle and bustle of city life is something I don't want all the time. I like that there's a lot of open space, there's a lot of open land. I like that maybe you have to drive half an hour to get to the next town, or 45 minutes to the next town. It's not all congested. So that's something that this kind of stuck with me living in Valley View and living in Grande Prairie, is just the open land and coming into contact with more of nature here than living in the city. And I know, Edmonton's got some great trails, and it's got the river valley there, and it's got some amazing green areas there that you can find.
Yeah.
But if you're going to the U of A, if you're living in some residential area in Edmonton, you're not really contacting nature a lot. You have to go out and find it. Whereas here, it's a little more in your face, that you're kind of in an area that's fairly open. There's a lot of If you go a little bit out of town to Grande Prairie, you'll be like in a forest. And I like that it's more in your face, that you're in nature, you're kind of embedded in nature. You're a small town that's kind of embedded in this large geographical area. Because I like nature. Ideally, I'd love to live more in nature. I think there's downsides to having so much development and living in areas that are so developed all the time and just staring at high-rise buildings and stuff like that. Our highest building in Grande Prairie is like, I don't know how many floors that was, that 214 place, that one there.
14 floors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Okay, 14 floors. That's the highest building in Grande Prairie. So it's kind of nice. I don't miss downtown core of Edmonton at all. So here I feel there's a little more connectedness with nature. And that's something I really enjoy about the Peace Country versus the city life. And like I said, you can find it in the cities, but you have to intentionally go and look for it. You'd have to look for those trails and look for those hidden gems and find spots where you can see the North Saskatchewan River and stuff like that. Here, it's a little more easier to find. Here, you can just drive 10 minutes and you'll find something that looks very natural to you, and you can go for a walk there, and you'll see some nice areas around Grande Prairie that you can go for walks in. And so I think it's more connected to nature that I like, and also an appreciation for farmers, to be honest. Again, when you're in Edmonton, you don't think about who's making all your food. Whereas here, you are coming in contact with people who work on the farms a lot.
Yeah.
And they're friendly people. You talk to them and you realize how hard they work. You realize that all that stuff is going around the city, all this farmland around the city, and all these things going on with cattle and all these sorts of things. And I don't know if you two grew up on a farm or not, but as you know, PWA, the students here are all from the surrounding areas of Grande Prairie. And so a lot of them live on farms. A lot of their parents own farms, and the kids work on those farms in many cases. And getting in touch with that was something that was new to me living in Grande Prairie, because in Edmonton, when you talk to a farmer, I never did talk to a farmer. Whereas here, I know lots of people who work on farms. I know kids who work on those farms because their parents own those farms.
Yeah.
I think that gives you a different perspective on how so many parts of society have to be functioning for everything to work.
Yeah.
In a big city, you don't really think about those sorts of things, right? Whereas here, I can see, it's a city life, but it's also that farming life as well. And it's kind of this interesting dynamic between the two, where you see both of those things at the same time, living in Grande Prairie. And, a lot of times you don't see those things together. Whereas here, I do see those things together.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have kids come in sometimes and tell me, "Oh, Hass, I couldn't do the worksheet. I do such and such chores on the farm." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Wow, like, okay, that's fine. Let's move the due date then. Like, if your parents needed you to do chores on the farm, fair enough. Let's figure something else out." That's not stuff you'd hear in Toronto or Edmonton, right? And it's
Yeah.
cool. It makes you realize that there's all these hardworking farmers around the city that are doing their thing, and they're important. They're a vital part of our economy.
Yeah. There's a professor, Sam Lawler, who's I follow on social media.
Mm.
She's a professor at the University of Regina, but she lives outside the city, and she works on a farm. Her husband is a school teacher, and she shares, things like right now. Each night she's waking up at 2 in the morning because her goats are going to give birth any day now, and she's just like
Oh, wow.
farming at night and teaching physics and astronomy during the
Yeah,
daytime. It's
tough.
quite the life to watch her lead.
That's unreal. And see, growing up in Edmonton, I would never even think that that was an issue, right? I would never think that students can't do homework because they have to do chores, or that someone's getting awakened at night because their animals are giving birth, and all these sorts of things. And yeah, you
Yeah,
don't think about those sorts of things in the city. So that's something I come into contact with living in Grande Prairie, and it gives you a broader perspective of how all walks of life are important,
yeah,
and how all these things are vital for the economy to kind of survive, right? And you don't want one area to suffer and the other area to you need all area you need to make sure you're thinking about all aspects of society, which kind of goes into politics a little bit, right? Because when politicians are talking, you don't want them to just be dealing with one small segment of the population. You want them to be talking about everyone. You want to be inclusive. Farmers, lawyers, school teachers, carpenters, all walks of life. You don't want to just focus on one small aspect of society. And I think that's the biggest thing for me living in the Peace Country is I've come across farmers and so many tradespeople. Whereas I don't think if I was working in the city, I would have come across as many as I have. Definitely not farmers. Tradespeople, probably not many. Whereas here, the parents of students, a lot of them are tradespeople. To get to chat with those guys and see how their life is, and it just gives you a broader perspective.
thank you for sharing. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
We're very grateful. I would love to talk with you for many more hours.
Yes.
I feel that sort of at the end of my high school experience that I did have friends in high school and we hung out and we did things and we played video games, we played
Mm,
basketball, we did stuff. But I didn't find that there were a lot of kids that have stayed connected with over time.
mm.
Steve Meckes is one of them,
Yeah, I remember him.
but otherwise it's mostly been you and Kim Holder.
Oh, wow.
It's like I don't know if it's like pretty typical to go through high school and end up with three friends where two of them are your science
Two of
teachers,
them are
but
teachers.
but that's how my life was. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate chatting with you.
No, absolutely. I enjoy having conversations with you. I find, you know what, to be honest, I do find that somewhat typical
Yeah,
that you ask, well, not the two teachers part, but
yeah, yeah,
I do find it's typical where you ask a 30-year-old, have you kept in touch with anyone from high school? And I find more often than not, maybe one person from high school they've kept in touch with. I find that the friend groups, the people they hang out with, are relationships they've developed later in life.
yeah,
In high school, you're kind of just forced to all be together, right? There's nothing connecting you except the fact that you're all in one cohort going through the grades together.
yeah,
And I don't know, I didn't really like that. Like going through high school, I haven't kept in touch with anyone from high school. I felt it was kind of a force. You're just in a forced group going through, this educational system. And for me, it wasn't until university and after where you get to start developing the more meaningful relationships because you're doing things that actually interest you, and you meet people who are also interested in those things.
right.
In high school, it's kind of a crapshoot, right? It depends on, do the kids around you have the same interests as you? And if they don't, what are you supposed to do, right? And maybe you join a sports team and meet people there. But I think for the most part, it's hard to connect with students in high school. I think it's partly also because you yourself don't know for sure what you're interested in.
Yeah,
As you're growing old, right? When you're growing older, you get a better sense of who you are and what you believe and things you enjoy, and then you kind of seek those like-minded people. In high school, I think you're just figuring all this stuff out. I found high school I don't say terrible, but I found high school, it was just a weird time. I don't know how you both felt, but for me, I found high school a weird time in my life because you're trying to figure out who you are. You're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life. You're
Yeah.
pressured by parents to choose something, and you don't even know what you even like at that stage. You're not even 18 yet. You've got to figure out what you want to do in university, or even if you want to go into university, maybe you want to work. How
Yeah.
do you know? How are you supposed to figure all this stuff out? And you feel like the decision you make is going to be this ginormous life impacting decision that you've got to make, and you've got to get it right, because if you screw up and make the wrong decision at the time, you feel that your life's going to just ruin from there. Of course, we know that's not true. Looking back, it was just, you can always change your mind, and
But it's hard to know,
it
and
is hard to know.
it's especially hard to feel that as a
Yeah,
teenager when everything else
absolutely.
always feels so much more intense. Yeah.
Right. Right. It's hard. It's such a hard period of time. I found university onwards to be much calmer of an experience than high school. High school is just such a weird, sure, you make friends and all that sort of stuff, but you're just figuring yourself out. You don't know what's going on. Like I said, you're kind of stuck with the friends you have around you. You don't even know if
Yeah.
you're going to be lifelong friends, and you just do the best you can, right? And
Well, I find it very heroic of you to teach teenagers. So
well, thank you.
it's
It is, yeah,
yeah,
it's a
it's not
challenge.
easy.
I was a
It,
teenager once, and I don't envy that guy.
uh,
and it is funny because I've taught some students, were absolute pains in high school and not good people. Like I teach them, and you'd be like, okay, well, I'm not gonna, there's no connection there with a student, unfortunately. Of course, you try and make those connections,
yeah,
but sometimes you don't, and they don't want that connection. They just want to get their 50% and they want to move on. Fine. But I've met some 3 or 4 or 5 years after they've graduated high school. And I swear they can be completely different people. I've had students that I've met 5 years after grad, and they're good, decent people and funny and smart, and you can talk to them. Whereas in high school, they were not in that spot, they were not in that space.
yeah.
And it just goes to show you that high school is just that transient, weird stage of growing up where you do the best you can. And that person who you were in high school is not who you're going to be for the rest of your life.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Thank goodness. And so even those kids that are tough, that you see me as a hero for teaching,
Yeah.
even those kids eventually, I'm sure, turn it around and become good people. It's just you just have to deal with them at the time. And you never know too. There also a lot of these kids are going through stuff, and it might even be just the stress of being a teenager and the stress of trying to figure out what they want to do with the rest of their lives. And
Yeah.
it's a very, very stressful period. So, like I said at the beginning, it's students like you who remind me that I enjoy this job, because most students are good. Most students are good kids. You build great relationship with them. They have senses of humor. They want to make you proud. They want to build those connections. Some kids are a challenge, but at the end of the day, I think, those kids grow up and look back, and they're thankful that they had a good teacher who was patient and understood their issues. And that's kind of what keeps me going in the job.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for continuing to teach the next generation.
Thank you. I try my best.
I do feel like your influence was not a small part on my trajectory to end up with a PhD in physics. Yeah, a lot of ways I feel like I'm here trying to finish my PhD
Yeah.
in part because the 16-year-old version of myself committed to trying to get a PhD,
Right.
to do what I want to do,
Yeah.
and
No,
I
it's
feel like you were a pretty big influence on that. Not that like you were the only influence.
small piece.
Yeah, you helped me build a lot of confidence in finding that, well, one, physics is I found very interesting,
Yes.
and then also that I was competent at it. We are out of time, but I would have definitely been taking robotics courses from you if it had been offered at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, no idea.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Oh, you've been great at it. Yeah. It's something that we've started to offer about 6-7 years ago, because obviously it's a growing industry. And so it was a great option to offer high school kids and get them into programming and all that sort of stuff. But I want to say, I'm very proud of both of you. You've got someone who's almost got their PhD in physics, and you've got a carpenter, and it's amazing. It's amazing. Like, that's why I love talking to students who have graduated and seeing where their life ends up, because you never know what they're going to do. And talking to the two of you, you've both built great careers and things. It's amazing. It's amazing that I had even a small part to play in that. It's very rewarding to think that I was a small piece of that puzzle.
So thank you. Very much appreciate it.
Well, thank you both.
Yes, thank you so much, Farouq Hassanali, for joining us on the show, sharing your experiences and insights. It's been a very pleasurable.
No, it was great. It was nice talking to you.
We're also grateful to everyone who listens to the show. If you want to share feedback with us or write in to say hello, you can email us at lifenorthofthe54th@gmail.com. You can also visit our website at peacecountrylife.ca and give us feedback, /feedback. So thank you so much, Farouq, and hope to see you around sooner rather than later.
Yes, come visit anytime.
Take care of yourself and your family.
You as well.
All right, till we meet again.
Bye.
Bye.